A tired mechanic shared a fist bump with a stranger, unaware she was the newly crowned Empress of the stars. The orbital docks of Vela Station were never quiet. Even in the deepest hours of the artificial night cycle, when most of the commercial lights dimmed and the vendors shut their stalls, the distant rumble of haulers, tugboats, and drones echoed through the steel bones of the place. For Jace Calder, mechanic for hire and owner of a failing garage on Deck 17, the noise was as constant as his own heartbeat. He worked with grease-stained hands and a stubborn resolve, patching together freighters too old for proper service and fixing shuttle engines that should have been retired decades ago. Jace wasn't a hero. He wasn't even ambitious. He was just a man who worked long shifts, kept his head down, and dreamed sometimes, quietly, guiltily, of a life that wasn't rust, bills, and sleepless nights. That night, bent over the cracked fuel coupler of a miner shuttle, he didn't notice the figure standing at the edge of his bay until she spoke. "You're hitting the line too hard. The pressure valve's going to snap." Jace flinched, swore under his breath, and turned. The woman was tall, her posture straight in a way that suggested discipline but not stiffness. Her dark hair was tied back, and her clothes, simple travel leathers, were dusted with the faint shimmer of starlight. She looked like any other drifter or spacer, except her eyes. They burned with a strange gravity, as though the stars themselves had taken root inside them. Jace wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist. "You an engineer?" The woman tilted her head. "Something like that." She crouched, pointing delicately at the coupler. "If you torque the seal clockwise instead of counter, the fracture won't spread." Jace grunted. "You sound pretty sure." "I am," she said simply. He handed her the spanner. "Then show me." She blinked at the tool, a flicker of surprise breaking her calm mask, before taking it. With practiced hands, she adjusted the coupler, and Jace had to admit she was right. The seal clicked into place. "No leaks." "Not bad," Jace muttered, impressed despite himself. The woman rose, brushing her palms together. "You're welcome." On impulse, maybe because he'd been working 14 hours straight and his brain was fried, Jace raised a fist. "Nice work." She looked at it blankly. "A fist bump," he explained. "It's a human thing." Slowly, cautiously, she pressed her knuckles to his. It was the smallest gesture, a casual spark of camaraderie, but it would be remembered in history books for centuries. Because Jace Calder, tired mechanic of Deck 17, had just fist-bumped Empress Lyra Valen of the Stellar Crown, the newly ascended ruler of the galaxy's most powerful empire. The Middle. Rumors in the dark. Jace didn't know who she was. Not yet. To him, she was just a traveler who happened to stop by his dusty bay, offering good advice. But in the higher decks of Vela Station, nobles, admirals, and politicians whispered. The stellar crown had fractured when Emperor Kalen died, leaving no clear heir. The galaxy's lords schemed and clawed at each other, tearing fragile alliances apart. Then, suddenly, quietly, a name rose above the chaos. Lyra Valen. Few had seen her coronation. Fewer still believed it real. But fleets were already swearing loyalty, planetary governors sending oaths of fealty. An empress had returned to the throne, and she had vanished. Some claimed she was touring the outer colonies in disguise, gauging the state of her people firsthand. Others whispered that she sought something lost, something even more important than power. Jace heard none of this. He just kept working, fixing ships for scraps of credits, eating cold rations, and grumbling at the rising station taxes. But the woman, Lyra, kept coming back. Sometimes she asked about mechanics. Sometimes she watched silently as he worked. Other times, she asked questions that struck him as odd. What do humans value most? What do you fear losing? Would you fight for a world that wasn't your own? Jace always answered plainly, not realizing he was speaking into the ear of an empress. People value family, he said once, tightening a bolt, even when they're a pain. We fear being powerless, he said another night, leaning against his workbench, having no say in what happens to us. And to her last question, he laughed, then frowned. Depends. If they were good people, sure. If not, I'd fix their engines, but that's about it. Lyra had only smiled, a quiet, almost sad curve of her lips. The turning point. Jace's life might have stayed ordinary, except for the attack. It began with sirens. A pirate flotilla, bold enough to strike at Vela Station itself, breached the outer ring. Explosions rocked the docks, scattering civilians and sending ships scrambling to flee. Jace barely had time to grab his tools when the blast doors blew open. Armed raiders stormed in, weapons crackling. He ducked behind a shuttle, heart pounding. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't brave. He was just a mechanic. Then he saw her. Lyra stood in the open, calm as starlight, as the pirates raised their guns. Something snapped in Jace. He grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy spanner, and, before his brain could scream at him to stop, he charged. The first pirate went down with a crunch of bone. Jace swung wildly, shouting like a madman, until blaster fire lit the bay. And then everything stopped. The pirates froze mid-motion, their weapons trembling. One by one, they fell to their knees. Not because of Jace. Because of her. Lyra's eyes burned brighter than suns. The air shimmered around her, heavy with invisible force. When she spoke, her voice was no longer just a woman's. It was command, authority, the weight of 1,000 systems. You dare attack my people? She thundered. The pirates collapsed fully, begging for mercy. Jace's spanner clattered to the floor. His mouth went dry. Your people, he stammered. Lyra turned to him. Her disguise was gone, stripped away by power too vast to hide. In that moment, Jace finally understood. The woman he'd fist-bumped in greasy overalls was no traveler. She was the Empress. The ending, a choice. After the battle, the station buzzed with revelation. News spread faster than light. The Empress had revealed herself. She had defended Vela Station with her own power. Jace, meanwhile, sat on the edge of his workbench, staring at his oil-stained hands. He didn't know whether to bow, run, or faint. Lyra entered quietly, dressed now in ceremonial silver, her crown faintly glowing. Yet when she looked at him, her gaze softened. You're not bowing, she said, amused. Jace rubbed his neck. I'm not really the bowing type. To his surprise, she smiled. Good. I have enough of that already. Silence stretched. Finally, Jace found his voice. Why me? Why spend time here? With a mechanic? Lyra's eyes shone with something unreadable. Because rulers forget. They forget what it means to live, to struggle, to be unseen. You reminded me. You treated me like a person, not a throne. He swallowed. And now, she said softly, I must rebuild an empire. But I would not mind if a certain mechanic stood at my side. Jace blinked. Me? I fix engines, Empress. I don't do politics. Then fix the engines of a galaxy, she whispered. Stand as the one who speaks truth when others dare not. That is more valuable than politics. For a long time, Jace stared at her outstretched hand, grease-stained.